That you have come to love if if you've been around for the two episodes that we've done prior to this. This is It Ain't Easy Being a Human, where we are here to share share compassion about the fact that it ain't easy being a human. It's a pretty universal experience. And also not leave it there. Just because it ain't easy doesn't mean we can't succeed, doesn't mean that there aren't ways that we can make it easier, more fun, more pleasurable, more likely to get ahead. And it is my great pleasure to have Tom Chenault on the show today. Tom, you and I met through the CEO of Contact Mapping, somebody who shares your last name, the wonderful Adrian Chenault, and you just happen to be the chief sales officer over there.
They had to have a title that I wouldn't mess up, and so they figured that title was it. I have literally nothing to do with the place except I'm the face, the bad face of a great company that's worked out real well.
Well, it's really an honor to have you on the show, and one of the things that I have learned through the months that we've been connected is I've learned that these 12-step programs are a big part of your life, and you are fun, you are successful, and by I think all kinds of metrics. Although I'd be interested to hear from you, how do you define success? And what we're here to do is I'm here. I know I'm going to get an upgrade from you in learning how the rest of us, what the rest of us can take from the 12-step programs.
Well, I had to redefine success. That's funny that you said that, because that's a great place to start. I was so unlucky, man, and I was this so I've always been a charismatic kid and a great place to visit, but you didn't want to live here because you knew something was just going to go wrong no matter what. But you just couldn't stand not being around to see the explosion go off called Tom Chenault's life, because I had great intentions, but things always got messed up. So I was a really successful restaurant guy, and I drank like a fish, and I had 103 employees under the age of 18 years old, and it was fast times at Ridgemont High, horrible stuff for years and years and years. And you get all that power as a restaurant guy because you've got the girls, you got the recognition, you got a decent amount of money, and you're kind of famous. And it was just horrible because my self-esteem was this big, my ego was this big, and alcohol just made it more and more wild. So finally, my dad goes, "Tommy, you are an alcoholic. You got to get out of the restaurant business." And I'm going, "Well, Dad, I don't think I'm an alcoholic, but what do you think I should do?" He said, "Well, it's making you drink. You got to sell something to rich people." So I said, "Fine." So I walked into, I've got a famous last name, Chenault, and that's a famous last name from World War II. So I walked into Beach Aircraft Corporation, which is the Cadillac of the sky, owned by Raytheon. And I walked up to this guy named Bill Fry, and I said, "I want a job selling airplanes. You any relation to Claire Chenault?" I go, "No, but that's going to get me in every office, sir." He goes, "All right, how many hours do you have?" I go, "None." He goes, "You want me to hire you to sell airplanes and you've never been in one?" I said, "Sir, look out that window." He said, "What?" I said, "You've got all those pilots out there you're trying to teach to sell, and all they're doing is wasting your gas. Why don't you teach a salesman to fly?" And he goes, "You're absolutely right." And he sent me to aircraft school, and I learned how to fly. And I just, I didn't learn it like all those people that are pilots, because they really learned it. I learned it so I could take that airplane from bar to bar. And that's what I did. I really was successful because I didn't want, somebody was going to get killed in those airplanes, and it wasn't going to be me. So I just flew those things and sold them, versus those pilots that wanted to fly and talk and fly and talk. I couldn't wait to get on the ground and go try to sell another airplane to somebody. So I did real well, and I drank like a fish. And I realized those people just wanted to get away from their life and their wife, and that's why they wanted an airplane. No other reason. And I was a hand drop for that. And I thought he hired me because of my last name, but he hired me because I was just a guy's guy drunk. that could sell airplanes to anybody. And he was right. So I drank myself out of that job. I mean, I would leave on Monday, go to all these unbelievable places, and come back on Friday with practically no clothes left because I'd left them all over Montana and Wyoming. It was a nightmare, but I was good at it. But I realized quickly enough, Aaron, that I was on the wrong side of the desk. Those guys were not anywhere near as hip, slick, and cool as I thought they were, and they were making all the money. So I said, I got to get on the other side of the desk and do what they do. So they finally came and fired me. So it took them actually 2 weeks to fire me because they had to find me, and I had an airplane. So I just made this guy named Ernie Reese was chasing me all over Montana, and he finally fired me in a place called Polo. He caught me in Polson, Montana, fired me, and they made me take the airlines back. And at that point, I said, man, I got to do something. And so a guy named Gary McAdam gave me a shot as a stockbroker. And I was like a hand grenade with the pinpole. And, oh, I forgot to tell you, the airplane test, I passed. I walked into this Bill Fry, and the test, I said, and I was broke and drunk. And he says, I said, when's the next test? And he goes, tomorrow. And I go, then when's the next test after that to learn to be an airplane salesman? He said, in a month. I said, you got to get me in that test tomorrow so I can proctor it, so I can actually see the test. But I knew what I was going to do. I stayed up all night long, and I memorized all the questions and all the answers. And I passed the airplane test before I had ever been in an airplane. And I walked into Fry, and I said I passed, and he about swallowed his cigar. But I didn't learn anything. I just put it in my brain and then left it, and then it was gone the next day. So the same thing happened in the brokerage business. I passed that Series 7 test, and the next thing you know, a reprobate is now a stockbroker. And I was really good at that because Beach had taught me to sell very expensive things. So I was an unbelievable stockbroker. I made millionaires out of people, Aaron, which is kind of a good news. But the bad news is that they used to be multi-millionaires. So
you got me, Tom.
Yeah,
you set me up, and you got me. There are a couple of distinctions that you've made that I'm intrigued by.
What?
I'll start with the easy, with maybe an easy question. What's easier to learn, flying or selling?
They can send a monkey to the moon. Flying is so easy. You can't teach a monkey to drive a car around the block. Bezos just took 4 tourists to space because it's all automated. So it's nothing. Flying's easy.
So my next question, you made a distinction earlier. You said that your how did you put it? Your self-respect was this big and your ego was this big.
Yeah, my self-esteem was minuscule.
Your self-esteem.
Yeah.
So help us with the distinction that you're making there.
Well, you can see that people with self-esteem are comfortable in their own skin. People with no self-esteem can't stop talking. It has to be bigger. It has to be louder, and alcohol just fueled that. The last place I wanted to be was with Tom Chenault.
So what's the difference between self-esteem and ego in your experience?
Probably you and I.
You and I are the difference. I'm an ego. You've got self-esteem. I take it.
So, I think there's there's an acronym in Alcoholics Anonymous for ego, which is edging God out. And I think that pretty much sums it out. I don't take credit for anything anymore. I'm a complete creature of surrender to God. I mean, I live my life in a very, very non-religious but spiritual way where I just don't drive the bus anymore. I never say no to anything. I just show up and let the miracles happen. And inside of that, it comes a humility and an understanding that we're just passengers on a really, really wonderful big ship. And I'm just trying to do the most good I can do on any given day.
So I'm intrigued by this idea that, I know, at least I believe I know that in the 12 steps they call surrender. Right? You were just talking about, I don't drive the bus anymore. You make decisions, right? I invited you, for example, to be on this show and you said yes. That's a decision. So what distinction do you make between the decisions that you make and letting somebody else drive the bus.
I mean, it is so rare that I say no to anything that involves something that I was going to say no to. You know, obviously, if somebody said, would you mind putting your hand on this hot stove, I wouldn't do that. There's common sense involved. But think of all the things that happen to you all day long where you just don't want to go. You do not want to go no matter what. I always say yes. And
Wow.
Yeah, I always say yes. Because everything, so here's the deal, Aaron, and you know this as well as I do, and this has probably got snot on it, but we don't care.
We'll forgive you the snot.
Hang on. But that terrible piece of pie right there, the one slice is what we know, the other slice is what we know we don't know, and the rest of it is where everything in my entire life has happened wonderfully. I'm in here manipulating those two pieces of the pie, completely screwing it up, trying to be God, and the rest of that pie is where I met my wife, where I met you, where everything magic happens. So now I try to live in the magic instead of Tom Chenault manipulation.
So what you're saying, I think, is that the magic happens in what we don't know, where we're completely clueless.
No, right here. Yeah. Where we don't know what we don't know. This is what we know. This is what we know we don't know. And this is what we don't know we don't know. So you're 1,000% right. And I don't think I've ever said that well.
Well, I mean, what a courageous way to live.
It's a blast.
Say more about that.
Well, you show up. You just show up, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's always a blast. You can get away, but 99% of the time, there's just a beautiful experience on the other side of it that you never saw coming. And I'm a closet introvert. I'd rather get in a fight than go to a party. So it's very hard for me to do so many things that normal people do. But at the end of the day, I do it just because I know something glorious is going to be on the other side of it.
You and I have something else in common. I just learned that we both are gregarious introverts. People learn I'm an introvert. I'm sure people learn you're an introvert, and they go, "No way."
I had a psychiatrist named Antoinette Helfrich. I was with her.
I can say that 3 times fast.
Myers-Briggs test. And she's looking down at the text, and she's looking at me. She's looking at the test, and I finally said, "Doctor, it's correct." Because she just could not believe the test said I was a Myers-Briggs bottom corner, complete whack job, scared of everybody guy, which is true.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I have
vodka.
I bet it's not. One of the things that I have enjoyed about you is when I call you and I don't get you, Tom, I get your voicemail, and your voicemail says, "Tell me something I don't know about you." So I may be about to do that. I'm a theater director by training, and you're talking about showing up. Like all I've got to do is show up. It's my favorite thing about being a theater director. Was, kind of setting the schedule at the beginning of the week with a stage manager. And then I just show up and I say, what are we doing now? And then the action unfolds in front of me with these actors. And I either believe it or I don't. I'm either compelled by it or I'm not. And I just say, tell me more about this. I need you to be more committed to that. What are you trying to accomplish with this? And when you were talking about showing up, that's what I was reminded of.
Yeah, because we have to stop thinking. The minute we're in our head, we lost. The minute we're being our authentic, vulnerable self, we're winning. You don't like hip, slick, and cool. You like people, especially in the theater business. Those people that are locked in their head can never bring anything out.
That's right.
That's
right.
The same thing with actual human beings, I think.
Well, you're making me think of all kinds of stories, but this is not a show about my stories. Tom, there are we've hinted at what we came together to talk about, which is what can the rest of us learn from 12-step programs. So I know there are 12 steps, and I wonder which one which one has been the hardest one for you to grapple with?
Step one. That's easy. That's so easy. It's all about the first one's the ass kicker because you just have to surrender. That's it. The first step of Alcoholics Anonymous is surrender. And when you are completely a control freak and an egomaniac, before we get there though, so in 1988, my income was $877,000 in 1988 as a lion, cheat, and stockbroker. That was a ton of money. And the bad news is, and I got 2 DUIs and 2 disturbing the pieces in 1 month. So that was a bad month. And I went to that Antoinette Helfrich, the psychiatrist, because I just thought I was a bad driver. I had no idea. And she said, no, you're a drunk and you need to go, you're not crazy. You just need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been going to the daily mass at the Carmelite Monastery thinking I was the Antichrist because I was making so much money. And I'd come home and I hated me. I hated everything in my life. And I was on the skid row of success. And I realized I'd climbed that ladder to the very top, looked around, and realized I was at the top of the ladder, but it was leaned against the wrong wall. And I had to climb all the way down there and then all the way back up, which was the greatest gift in the world. And inside of that, I got the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. This book was made for me in 1988. We went to a place called the Phoenix Concept at 2162 Lawrence Street in Denver, Colorado. We all sat in a room with 2 pieces of wood. We carved our sobriety date on this piece of wood. We sanded it, we varnished it, and then we put it on the cover of our book, and I've had this book ever since.
And it's beautiful. For those of you who are on the podcast, this is a work of art he's just shown us.
33 years later, it hasn't fallen apart yet.
And that's not because you never crack it open.
A book called The Sermon on the Mount, which is kind of a book by a guy named Emmett Fox. And it was kind of why the big book was written, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is my go-to book in times of trouble. And if you look at this book, you can see that I pray in the bathtub because those aren't tears that have warped all these pages. It's just me dropping the phone in the tub. But, I have found myself to be a man of unbelievable prayer in sobriety. And I love that, not to some religion, not to some cult or culture, just to a God of my understanding that just gives me this feeling constantly, a lot like meditation, that things are going to be okay. And that's how I live my life. And I live them through these 12 steps. And it's a way of living where, you basically, let me run you through them real quick because I think it'll be important to you. Basically, what you do is you walk into AA, and it's the last place you want to be. You think you're going to walk in the door, and there's going to be a bunch of winos laying on the floor, and you just don't have any idea. And there's about 30 people in the room, and you hate yourself so bad that you go around the room and just figure out a reason to hate everybody. She's ugly, he's fat, boom, boom, boom. It's just horrible how you do it because you don't like yourself at all. And you just sit there. And the first meeting I went to was like 7 hours long, and I looked at my watch, and it had been on for 15 minutes.
Can I pause you there for a moment, Tom? Because you just said something so profound, I think, for the rest of us. And by the rest of us, I just mean the folks who haven't acknowledged their addictions. Right? Yeah. I'm addicted, for example, to being right. But I'm even choking up a little bit about it. The way you talked about you hate yourself so much that you judge the other people in the room.
Right.
And there's I think that's like one of the things that we can take from this conversation with you, Tom. One of the things I'm taking from this conversation is that my judgment of others is my own insecurity.
No question.
Like, otherwise, why wouldn't I just at worst be in a live and let live frame of mind?
That's why wouldn't you be in a live and let live frame of mind? Because
Otherwise, right? I mean, if I weren't in my insecurity,
yeah,
why? What other reason would I have for possibly judging people that way?
yeah, you're 100% right. There's no other
So,
reason.
thank you for letting me pause you. Please continue.
Well, I'm going to speak to that a little bit.
Hmm.
I have heard that normal people take their problems straight to God. I will agree with that supposition. I
Okay.
will also say that I have never met a normal person. They all go somewhere. They all go to the bar. They all go to porn. They all go to gambling. They all go to their phone. They say that the average person goes to their phone a minimum of every 6 minutes of every day. We're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to text messages. We're addicted to this. We're addicted to the gym. We're addicted to AA. And nobody's going straight to God. I'm positive about that. And for me, my addiction moves around like you wouldn't believe. If I stop it with alcohol and drugs, it's going to be sugar. If I stop it with sugar, it's going to be coffee. It's going to be, and my whole goal in my life is making sure I'm channeling the addiction that I am with towards something positive, towards something versus something negative.
Wow, that's a profound thing to say, right? If we can agree that we're all addicts in some way or
We
another,
are.
right? Talk more, would you, about directing your? I don't, it's even hard for me to wrap my mind around it a little bit enough even to remember exactly what you said about channeling this addiction or directing this addiction toward something positive. Say more about that.
I catch myself all the time going down the wrong rabbit hole. And thank God for James Clear in his great book, Atomic Habits, because he talks about the cues creating the craving that create the action that creates the outcome. And it isn't about goals, it's about changing those cues. So when I catch myself obsessing about something, which is the craving, I realize I have to change the cue. I am looking at the thing wrong, and the cue is ahead of the craving. And most people don't get that. They don't distinguish between the two. And today I do that. So if I walk down these stairs right now, there's a great big Sub-Zero refrigerator sitting there, and it starts screaming at me to eat something bad. And I have to recognize the cue and look at the outside and look at the outcome of whatever it is that I'm going to eat, recognize the craving and change that cue. And all of a sudden I don't want to do that anymore. It's awesome.
So let's dig into that a little bit, right? So there's the cue, and then there's the craving, and then there's the action. So what's talk to us a little bit about the cue? What's a cue?
The cue's the thought. I mean, you're going down there, and what cued you to walk by that refrigerator? When I hit that refrigerator, the cue happened that created the cue and craving. So the key to the whole deal is stay in the front of the craving by recognizing the cue that had me pull the door open to see something stupid to eat.
Right. Yeah. When I blank, I have a craving too. Right.
Yeah.
So, right. When people say when I'm in a social situation, I have a craving to smoke. Or I have a craving to drink. Right. So that's the cue. I love that it's so important to notice that, because the craving doesn't come up all of and by itself.
No,
it's preceded by this cue.
And the cue might actually happen up here in my office, to head me down the stairs to manifest the craving. Yeah, it's nuts. We are.
And then, who was it who said something about the space? There's a space between thought and action.
I know who that is, but yeah.
But that's where we can intervene with that craving, because there's a space between the cue and the craving, and between the craving and the action.
Yeah. Yeah. Some woman. Yeah, that's true. So it's really, really cool. And it's a great exercise So I walked into AA, so the first thing that happens is they said, okay, you got to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And you say, no, I'm not going to do that. They go, okay. Well, and they go, why? And I go, well, I don't have time. They go, you had time to drink. And I go, yeah, you don't understand. I'm an important stockbroker. They said, okay. So I went out, didn't go to 90 meetings in 90 days, got drunk, crawled back in the door. Then they said, now you've done that. You need to read this book. And this was the book. And so I kind of, I'm a smart guy. I passed that airplane test overnight. I did the same thing with the brokerage test overnight. I did the same thing here. The guy kind of laughed at me and said, no, we're going to read this together line by line. And this guy was a homeless guy that had been sober a long time, that was just a complete and total bum. And I go, you're going to teach me, a guy making $800,000 a year, how to read a book? He goes, yeah. I go, sure. I said, so of course I ignored him. Went out, got drunk. I crawled back in the door, and the same thing happened again. He said, now you're going to read the book with me? I go, yeah, I'll read the book with you. So we do the book. Then he said, you have to do these 12 steps we're going to talk about in a minute. And I go, with who? He goes, with me. And there's a couple of things in there where you have to tell this homeless guy all your deep and darkest secrets. And I'm going, this is not going to happen. So I went out and got drunk again, crawled back in, said, I'll do the work. Finally went through. So I went to the 90 and 90, read the book, did the steps, finally got done with it all. And I said, okay, now what? I graduate, right? And he goes, no. You didn't graduate. You never graduate. I go, what do I do? He goes, you go help other people do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that for the rest of my life. I go to an AA meeting every day of my life. I went to one today. I go every day of my life. And my life is unbelievable, as you know. And I am a born con artist. I believe myself I can tell myself anything. So that guy said, so in Longmont, Colorado, where I live, I'm trying to point at that guy. In Longmont, Colorado, where I live, they did this thing. A charity for battered women had an artist paint all the influential people in town. And they knew that at the auction, everybody would buy their own picture and get a lot of money. I had them paint this guy, who was an alcoholic sitting at the corner, who was a dear, dear friend of mine. I had them paint him. And they go, why? I go, because I want that painting. And they said, why? I said, I'm going to hang it in my office for the rest of my life. And they said, why? So I don't start thinking I'm half as hip, slick, and cool as my paycheck is trying to tell me I am. And every day I look over my shoulder and I remember where I came from, because I'm one drink from going back there again.
So, wow. Tom.
That's
so cool. How long, Tom, have you been sober?
33 years.
33 years. And now I'm not very...
That's not much. That's not much. 12,000 days is a long time.
Yeah. Is that how long that is?
It's more than 12,000. 12,087 days, I think.
12,087 days. And how many of those days have you gone to an AA meeting?
Almost all of them.
That's incredible, right? So we went from your resistance to going to 90 to now you've done almost 13,000 of these things.
Yeah.
And you're no less accomplished and right than you were then. You were too busy and important to go to these 90. And since then, you're making more money. You're the chief sales officer for contact mapping. You've got another business, at least one other business in addition to that. Your paychecks are looking fine. So how is it that you have time for 13,000 meetings?
I don't have time not to. So people always try to get me to go to church with them on Sunday. I go to church every day of my life. What are you, crazy? 7:30 in the morning, it's non-negotiable. Everybody knows they don't call me for that hour. I'm a man I get up early. I read newspapers. That contact mapping you talk about, most of the time I message all these people I'm supposed to remember that day from the bathtub. So I get up about 5:30 in the morning, and I spend about an hour in the tub, and I'm all wrinkled in the whole shot. I can pop out of there. And then I do a conference call, a motivational call for about 80, 90 people, which is called the Hair on Fire call, aptly enough. And that takes me to 7 o'clock. And then between 7 and 7:30, I try to do some sort of spiritual or relational Facebook Live for that world, and then I do my AA meeting between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning, and then I'm pretty much off to the races. So it's pretty sick. I have, and there's a guy out there named Frank Kern, Aaron, that did this. He was. I listened to his video because I heard he made $6 million in a day doing all kinds of jazz on the internet, and I was intrigued by that. And in the middle of it, he gave me a really important 15 minutes of my life, whereby he said, design your perfect day for you, and then live the rest of your life into that day. And what I have done is exactly that. I have lived my life into the perfect day, and I live that every day. So I wake up with my hair on fire. I go to sleep completely emptied out and wake up and do it again the next day. And here I am, 70 years old. Every one of you, I'm like your grandfather. And I have never been more fired up or relevant in my life than I am this day, the 2nd of November, 2021. Is that cool?
Yeah. So I just want to point out one of our listeners right now has said that you and all you have been are today. All you have been and are today is what started my journey of recovery from hating myself.
Yeah, that's where she came from. She's in Perth, Australia, right this minute. The beautiful Karen Hammond. And,
what a profound effect to have had on somebody's life, Tom.
You start taking responsibility for that profound effect, then you better take responsibility for their life going to hell in a handbasket. So I like to say I was just there to help God with the deal, So I'm not buying any of that real estate because I've had more than one go off the cliff at the same time. I love Karen, but she will tell you I've never taken credit for any of her success.
What another profound thing you've just said. There's so many profundities here, right? If you're going to take credit for helping somebody accomplish, then you better be ready to take credit for when they go to hell in a handbasket. I'm leaving the credit to them and to God. That's really something, Tom.
Works.
So you wanted to go through all 12. I think we're still stuck on surrender. Where would you like to take us next?
Well, you take a look at what the 12. So basically, just blasting through the 12 steps of, and I talked about the first one being the most badass, and I'm going to change 2 words because the first step is we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. But basically, the truth of the matter is, I had to admit that I'm powerless over everything and that my life was unmanageable. Not just alcohol. The alcohol for me, Aaron, was only a symptom. I had to peel that onion back, and that's why contact mapping is so doggone important. Everybody thinks it's about the app. Every day we have an AA meeting in contact mapping for normal people because there is no difference between me and anybody else. We are all human beings trying to get through a day the best we can. And so what we do is we have a meeting every day. And basically that meeting looks like this. I don't know if you know. Yeah, you do. Holy mackerel. This comes from your buddy, Jerry Kalana. That unbelievable book of his called Reboot. He talks about radical self-inquiry, sitting down and sharing that with other human beings, like-minded human beings, going to the edge of the clay and going to the back for all the answers. That's all contact mapping and Alcoholics Anonymous are. That's it. You love Jerry, don't you?
I do. Jerry Colonna is a hero of mine.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned how none of us have control over anything, right? We don't have control over our baser impulses. I sure as hell don't have control over my wife, right? I mean, there's so much pain involved with not acknowledging that reality.
Yeah.
It's the source of suffering, really.
truly is. And people can see the deer in the headlights.
You know,
They know.
right now, Tom, you know, I've got a migraine headache. And, you know, so many people just are floored by them. And by the way, sometimes I am too. It's not the worst one in the world. I'll tell you, one of the things that gets me through is simply recognizing that I don't have control over that right now.
Yeah.
And then it becomes pain instead of suffering. I'm in a lot of pain right now. I'm not suffering. I'm having a great conversation with my buddy Tom.
Yeah, that's what it is. And what we resist persists.
Mm,
So don't. I mean, if you can just be with it, it will dissipate. It's when we resist things that things stick around and torture us.
mm.
That's so hard. It doesn't make any sense, but it makes all the sense in the world. Yeah.
So the second of the 12 steps is
Worse.
bel believing in a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity, or something to that
Yeah.
effect.
So you have to. So two things have to be acknowledged there. That the typical alcoholic or addict or anybody does not want to admit. Number one, in our heart of hearts, we do not want to admit there's anybody greater than ourselves. And the second half of that is admitting by virtue of the statement that we're insane. Because if we have to be restored to sanity, we
Mm,
must not be sane. So that's a tough step that's a tough pill to
mm.
swallow until you believe it's true.
Yeah, well, if I if I know, for example, that the absolute best thing for me is to exercise today,
Yeah.
and I go instead with I don't feel like it. What better definition for insanity is there?
Amen.
And by the way, I make that decision. I make that decision, and I eat too much sugar, and you know, I'll have a bite of something, and no, this is not good for me. Right, a moment on the lips, a lifetime of this ain't good for me. But we make the decision.
Yeah. So then you go to that third step, made a decision to turn, not we did it, just made that decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understand Him.
Hmm.
Not that crappy God that you had at church that was telling you to do 45 Hail Marys and a bunch of push ups. A God, you know, in my life, I got a loving God that just has me. I love turning my will and life over to that care of that guy because he's doing a whole lot better than me. So
So let
number
me
one,
ask
I had
you.
to make that decision, and two, I had to redefine God in order to have it fit for me, not fit for the
Hmm.
one that my grandmother had my mom understand and foist on me.
So let's talk about God for a second, because I want, you know, this one has me wondering all the time. For the atheists among us,
Sure.
is there no hope from AA and 12-step programs, or is there a
No.
way to be to have your atheism and eat it too?
Okay, so what does an atheist think about God, Aaron?
That he doesn't exist.
Okay, so that's how an atheist understands God.
Hmm.
Can't
So
live
then
out of these things. That was a trap.
so then how do you turn your life over to something that doesn't exist?
The same way that you're doing it right now. It's all a basis of faith. So you're giving it up. You're just taking yourself out of the equation.
Perhaps it's the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh,
That's easy. I think it's easier for an atheist than it is for a card carrying whatever.
hmm.
Because you don't have all the religiosity binding you down. You're just standing there in nothing. Because that's basically where you are. You're standing in nothing.
Wow.
God
Wow.
is.
This is great. This is great. Well, so for you, the atheist who's listening, right? I mean that as you God as you understand him includes you, which is
Yeah.
pretty profound. That the non-existence of God is an understanding of God. That's really something.
99% of the alcoholics that walk into Alcoholics Anonymous will run out the door when they see the word God because they feel like God's the one that got them in that trouble in the first place. And it's probably true, but it was their God, not God. It was some crazy convoluted concept of God that their grandparents taught them.
So we're answering this question that's come in a little bit, Tom. How did you redefine God for yourself? One of our listeners wants to know.
Hang on, the dog's barking. Whoever heard that. Okay, so say that question one. How did I redefine what?
God for yourself. How did you do that? What maybe that's
for me, God's always evolving. I mean, I'm telling you, it's not a one. I think I'm closer now to. My wife's a Buddhist. If I had to pick a story in the history of religion that I found to be my favorite, it would probably be the story of God and Jesus. But I happen to believe that God had a lot of kids, not just one. And so I refuse to send somebody to hell because they don't believe the same way as me. So my thinking has changed over the years, and it's boiled down 100% to something that is so clean and so clear for me, it can't be argued. And that is the cliche that I've heard forever, but I never believed or really understood. And that is God is simply love.
And that's really pretty. That's pretty fantastic. And I found myself inspired a moment ago, Tom, to share with you. I don't know if I've shared this with you before. My personal mission in life is to elevate human dignity, and most of the time I'm doing that in corporations. Oh, I lost you, Tom. There, you're back. I'm doing that in corporations, and I think you're muted. But I'm also doing it in this show with you. We're here. We're elevating human dignity. And so the way that I have thought about what God might be in my life is God is that action which most elevates human dignity, which I think is not distinct from God, the idea that God is love. And we can't hear you. I think you're muted.
That's 100% right. And you hit the nail on the head. But what freedom, not having to make all those important decisions, just standing in love, where you're not living in your past and you're not living in your future. You're just living in the now, showing up for what's put in front of you is unbelievable freeing. And somebody asked me what life is teaching me right now. I got blackmailed by a goofball on the internet this year. Just did something really, really rotten to me. And it was embarrassing, and I was probably 5% guilty. And my ego got hold of me, and I thought I could buy my way out of it. And I made all kinds of bad decisions about that. I kept a secret from my wife for months and from Adrian and everybody. So the lie was right behind my eyes, but I didn't think anybody knew it. And so I will tell you, and then I have a 33-year-old daughter who is very, very aware of everything in life. So she and I have had some deep conversation about her dad's racism, about his microaggressions, about a lot of stuff that was really, really tough to hear, to be a better person on the other side of. And then I was married 30 years ago, and a bunch of stuff from that mistakes that I made came back to the present for me to look at again with another pair of glasses called extreme remorse. So I will tell you all that life this year has been introspective and hard for me to understand why this is all coming up, but at the same time, so unbelievably thankful because I'm in a position to not strike back, but to look inward and come out of it a better person. So that's what life is bringing me right now, and it's been interesting, pretty hard, and well worth it.
Tom, one of the things that I've admired in conversations that I've had with you, conversations that I've heard you have with others in public, is this kind of incredible transparency, right? Like, how many of us would say in front of God knows how many people right now, you know, her dad's racism, you know, and just simply acknowledge the fact of that. And I'm guessing that it's connected to that transparency is connected to this freedom that you were just talking about.
Yeah, you know, we're only as sick as our secrets, and people already know. And what I've done is I've made enough, enough money and and gotten enough things that I realize it's got nothing to do with happiness or anything else. I've got to improve all my relationships, especially the ones closest to me. And the way that I do that is to get anything between us out of the way. And going back to the contact mapping, I have 4 or 5 people that really don't like me very well. I mean, they don't like me at all. In fact, the thought of me probably really doesn't make them happy even thinking about me. And on a regular basis, I send them a text message, and don't say I love them or something that really would piss them off, but just tell them I know they're alive and that I'm here. And the reason is there's twofold. Number one, I think I should. Number two, I think there's 3 reasons. I think I could repair the relationship someday. And number 3, the most important is that they're between me and God. They are between me and God. And so when you start thinking about that, that means that they're closer to God than I am. And I got to pray them out of the way. So that's what I do. So
Tell me more about how does someone not liking you stand between you and God?
Because they're between me and God.
Okay, we can leave it at that. I'm curious about the function of that, but
here's God.
Yeah.
Here they are. And
Yeah.
they're between me and God. So I got to pray them out of the way so I can get closer to God.
Okay.
I got to pray for their problems. I got to pray for my healing with them.
Well, Tom, there's another thing that we have in common. There are people who don't like me also. And I do, you know, I strive to not make that about them. Right. And just say, as you were just talking about, there may be an opportunity if I keep the door open to repair this relationship someday.
I don't want to die. I'm 70. You're 12. I do not want to be. When you start getting to be my age, you're starting to say, you know, I don't really want to leave here with any unfinished business. And I'm going to do all I can to repair things that even might not even supposed to be repaired. It's just not worth it to me to have anybody losing any sleep over something Tom Chenault did. And I just don't want that.
So let's see. We've been in this conversation for a while. I don't want to make everybody, you included, you know, miss their dinner.
They have nothing to do. Why don't you stay here? Where would you go? You got a headache. You're just going to go lay down.
I'm not ending the conversation. I'm just wondering, you know, if since we're having a conversation about what can 12 steps 12-step programs offer to the rest of us, and by the rest of us, I mean
okay. Can we go there real fast? Because it's so important. So we just went into God.
Yeah.
So now we have to go into each other. So then you make this list. That 4th step, you have to make a list of all the things you're pissed off about. So you write down, I am mad at Joe because Joe broke my rifleman rifle when I was 7 years old. What? Okay, so now I'm mad at Joe for breaking the rifle. What did that affect? It affected my happiness. Okay, the 4th column is what's my part in that? And you are there for every resentment you've got. And you go through this long list and you write it all down, and this crazy sponsor is there with you every inch of the way. And you're writing down all these resentments against them and them against you, and it's all on a piece of paper. And all of a sudden, you're looking at this big document and you're seeing your part in everything rotten that ever happened to you. And then you have to go to this sponsor And this guy you sit down with, it's not like the priest behind the counter. It's some alcoholic like you that, just thinks like you do. And you tell him all this stuff, and he looks at you and says, thanks for telling me, and here's what we do now. And then you ascertain what your character defects are and your shortcomings. And that's a bad deal. And you're going, gee, many Christmas, you mean I was this, this, and this? And you go, yeah, you were this, this, and this. And then the guy goes, well, your next decision is, do you want those to go away? And you have to make a decision at that point whether you do or not. Because when you get on your knees and you ask God to remove those shortcomings in character defects, God removes them. So you better be darn sure you want them gone. So now you're a different human being coming out of that. That's the 6th and 7th step. You've written them all down. You actually don't like the way you were. You realize they caused all your problems. And you're asking God to remove those defects of character and shortcomings. So then you hit that next step, which is the 8th step. And you write down the list of all the people you've harmed. And you go down all those people.
One of the things I notice about myself, Tom, when I'm looking at my character defects, is that I just like not exercising, right? Is I recognize them as character defects, and I don't necessarily want to let them go.
They're your friends.
Why don't I want to let them go, Tom?
Because they've worked for you, even though you're a sick person. They work for you, and you think they're serving you, but by virtue of the fact that you knew it was a character defect, you knew it was a manipulation or a con, you're just not ready to let go of it yet. And that's just rigorous honesty. You're not ready yet. Nobody says that there's no test at the end. Hang on to it for a while, but once you realize it, it's just a matter of time before you rewind, go back, find that sponsor again, and say, we got to handle that.
So what do you think about this idea, Tom, that there's power and freedom even in simply acknowledging, okay, this is me being an asshole right now, right? I'm not willing to not be an asshole. And I'm making this to simply acknowledge to yourself, this is me making a decision to be a jerk.
You're going to live that life for a while until it won't work anymore.
I certainly have. I have gained a lot of power, right, to make a different decision. But I notice sometimes it is a tough one.
Okay, so there's something about that. So there's an answer for that inside of the steps, by the way. So we've just done the 8th step where we made the list of all people we've harmed. And then the 9th step is you go talk to those people and say, man, I'm really, really sorry. Like meaning it.
Yeah.
And what people do in AA for sure is they forget to do the first 8 steps, and then they go do the 9th step and apologize. And really, they're blubber and tears and the whole shot, and everybody's buying it, and they let the husband move back in, but he didn't really do the work. So 2 weeks later, he's out cheating on the wife again, and it's really invalidated it all one more time. So the name of the game is do the steps in order and really mean it, and really let God remove those defects of character. And then you go to that person and say those defects of character. You just said being an asshole. You didn't ask God to remove that. So you're still going to be an asshole again. So you're not going to walk up to somebody and go, listen, man, I'm never going to be an asshole again. Because you knew it was a lie, and you knew that you didn't have it removed, and it was just a Band-Aid and a looking good. But assume that you're the asshole again. So the 10th step is, let me read it to you so I have it dead right. I'll just read it to you real quick, So the 10th step is continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Which means what? Which means that, holy mackerel, I did it again. But instead of just being that asshole for a long time, you promptly admitted that you made a mistake, said I'm sorry, and lived another day.
I love that word, promptly.
Yeah.
Another thing you don't know about me, Tom, is I'm kind of a dog training nerd. Right? I love all things kind of dog training and dog behavior. And one of the biggest differences between somebody who's an excellent dog trainer and somebody who's not is timing. Timing and consistency. It's all about timing and consistency. right? So your dog pees on the rug. If you catch him doing it and you say no, it takes 6 days tops to house train your dog. But if you're late, if you say no 30 seconds later, if you say no even 5 seconds too late, the effectiveness of that slows down. So that promptness is so important, and I love that you brought it into the conversation.
You better go tell Adrian that he just got a puppy. Peeing everywhere.
Adrian is welcome to call me anytime about.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, that's exciting.
And this is a great transition into what I think maybe kind of is the last question of our conversation. We've had a Facebook user who said that they know your son Adrian, as I do, and I love him. He's an extraordinary human, says this Facebook user, and I agree with that. What was your philosophy, Tom, as a parent raising a kid like that? And to keep it topical, to keep it as a part of the conversation we're having, I would ask, what place do these 12 steps have in your raising Adrian to be the remarkable human that he is?
I like to say I was such a terrible example that those kids said, here's what we do, not what he did. So that's number one. But, Adrian, this is the craziest thing. When Adrian was a little boy, I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I was at an AA meeting, and the 2-bedroom apartment was Adrian and his sister lived in the bunk beds, and then I had the master bedroom, and we had these 2 giant closets. So I'm at an AA meeting, I meet a guy, and he is drunk, and it was a Friday night, and I told him that if he stayed sober till Monday, I would help him with his life. I'd help him stay sober. So he stayed sober over the weekend, and he was adorable. His name was Isaac Pacheco, and I promptly brought him home. And in that 2-bedroom apartment, if you're a single dad, especially, your kids never sleep in their beds. They sleep with you anyway. So I gave the bed to Isaac. I moved Adrian and Courtney into the closets, and like a Lilliput, and that's where their closet. That's where their like rooms were. And then and Isaac lived with us for 7 years, and I mean it was unbelievable. And we learned so much humanity. We learned about the underdog, and we learned so much from that guy. And he actually my wife actually married him, because when I met Denise, courted Denise, Isaac was in my life. And even though we got married, we didn't kick Isaac out. He lived with Denise and I and Adrian and Courtney. And we had a blast. And he died a homeless guy living in our house. And it was beautiful. And Adrian learned, and Courtney learned, and Dominic learned empathy and love, and that their dad walked his talk. And that was the most important thing. I would take them to AA meetings, and I was just there. I've been the home group, they call it. There was a creek outside, and it was just a room full of smoke, and the kids wouldn't stay there. And so I said, you guys go down and catch crawdads in the creek, and I'll look out the window at you to make sure you're okay. And I'm looking out the window, and Courtney does a gainer into the lake, and she's into the stream, and she's floating downhill, and Adrian had to pull her out. That's the kind of life these kids grew up with. But it molded us. They learned recovery. They learned that ugly, down and out people are beautiful too. And they learned so much about all of that became life lessons for them. That both of them are unbelievably good human beings now. They were smart to begin with, but they got their heart from me. I think they got their empathy. Their mom is a remarkable woman. But the whole loving the underdog thing, I think they got from me. That's all they got from me.
Well, Tom, I have had the great pleasure of meeting and hanging out with and talking often with Adrian, and I think the fact that he has decided to work with you in the same company, in the same C-suite, probably indicates that you did more than just give him an example of what not to do. I think it was just this morning I heard somebody on a podcast saying nobody has no value because at worst you can use them as an example of what not to do. But I can say, this conversation with you, Tom, has touched me. I said on social media that I was going to be getting an upgrade through our conversation today, and that I knew that our listeners would also have an opportunity to get a mental upgrade. I think I have delivered on both of those promises. This has been an upgrade for me. I think it's been an upgrade for our listeners. Are there any other thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience?
It's so easy to look at people as prospects. It's so easy to look through people. And what I would ask you all to do is, no matter what you do for a living, no matter where you are in your life, look at people as human beings and step into what you can do for them. Get your agenda out of the way and serve. And it will pay you on this planet, and it'll pay you in the hereafter, no matter what that looks like to you. I'm a firm believer of that. And let's get rid of all this hate and all this division and unite with our definition of God, which is love with no other rules. That's all I want to say.
Well, Tom, I truly appreciate you doing this. Being a part of this conversation has been an honor. It's been an honor to have you on the show, folks. It ain't easy being a human.
Yeah.
But it's what we've got, and there's an awful lot of fulfillment and pleasure and joy and success to have. And keep coming back. Keep coming back for this show, because we're going to have other guests like Tom. My wonderful co-host, Kristen Graham, was not able to make it to join us today, but she'll be back. She'll be back next time. And Tom, I hope we'll have you back another time. Maybe we'll go through 6 more, or maybe we'll talk about something completely different. Anyway,
and I know some unbelievable train wrecks that I'd be happy to tune you into too, that have done okay in life, that are really good. There's nothing better. Brene Brown talks about it. Everybody's got a story that will bring you to your knees if you'll just take the time to listen. And what people have gone through is just such a joy to learn, and learning your story. Aaron, I love you. And I told you that the very first time I met you. Were taken aback because I fell in love with you at first sight. Yeah. You just weren't even able to be with it, if you remember. And I told you I love you really early in the game. And you go, what do you love about me? And it was so cute because he's just adorable. He said, you just want to hug him.
Well, so, I'm curious. It's and I'm in a line of work where one of the principles we teach our clients is be specific. Yeah. Right. So if somebody gives you feedback, learn more about it. Right. There are gems in that feedback, and if it's broad, dig.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love you, man. Thank you.
I love you too, Tom. And my love deepens every time we have an opportunity to get together. So thank you for getting together with me again. And in particular, in a setting like this where we can share it.
The big question, was I nervous? The answer, I was very nervous. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.